Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. Welcome to the Part 4 of our reading from the book Deliverance from Error by Hamid Al Ghazali. May Allah be pleased with him. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Part 3. The Theology of Teaching Ta'alim and the Dangers which arise therefrom. When I had finished with philosophy, having examined it well and revealed its error, I perceived how inadequate the science was, for reason alone cannot clear up every problem and resolve every difficulty. After that, there came on the scene the supporters of teaching ta'alim, who spread theories about the acquisition of knowledge by the intermediary of an infallible imam or teacher of the truth. I was about to start studying their doctrine and to read their books, when a formal order from His Highness the Caliph obliged me to write a treatise on the subject to disclose their true themes. As I could not avoid this, my personal impulse was now given an external motivation. Therefore, I began to collect the text and the sayings attributed to supporters of education or teaching. I took account of recent discussions which differed from the opinions of the first representatives of the sect. In this way, I assembled a well-worded collection and addressed a complete reply. To such an extent, indeed, that certain people of the truth then reproached me for my favorable attitude. They said, "You have done their work. Without you, your detailed study, and the logic of your expose, they would never have been able to know the precise flow of their thought." This reproach is not without foundation. When Ahmad ibn Hanbal criticized al-Haris al-Muhasibi, may Allah be pleased with them, for his attacks on the Mu'tazilites, al-Haris replied that it is obligatory to refute innovation. But Ahmad replied, "Indeed, but you have begun by quoting their uncertainties before replying to them. How do you know that one of your readers will not absorb the uncertainties without taking note of your reply, or read your reply without really understanding it?" This remark by Ahmad is just on condition that it is a question of an uncertainty, of something equivocal which is not already widely known. Otherwise, it is quite necessary to answer it, which is to begin by exposing it. Of course, it would be useless to speak of an equivocal thought that the supporters of education have never held. I have not done this, but one of my friends, who used to be one of them, suggested this. He told me that the sect in question laughs at its detractors' work, saying that they have understood nothing of their position. It was then that he explained to me what they do believe. I reviewed it later so as not to be accused of ignorance. I made a clear expose of it so that no one could accuse me of not having understood any of it. I even pushed it to the absurd in order to make apodictic proof of its errors. The result of all this was to reveal that this group has nothing of value to offer. The innovation, so weak in content, would not have made such an uproar without the help of the ignorant friends of truth. But their passion for the truth has led the defenders of the faith to have long discussions with this group in order to condemn their theories, namely the necessity of teaching dispensed by teacher, and not just any teacher suffices. It must be an infallible teacher. This double thesis, the need of authoritative teaching and the infallible teacher, has had wide circulation. While the arguments against it have appeared weak, some people have even believed in the solid basis of teaching and the weakness of its adversaries instead of perceiving the ignorance of the former. It is true that we need a teacher, an infallible master, but he already exists. This is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Should they say, "But he is dead," we shall answer, "Your teacher is in hiding." If they say, "Our teacher has trained and sent out missionaries, he is awaiting their return in order to inquire about their disagreements and problems," we shall reply that our master also trained and sent out missionaries, and that his teaching is perfect. For God the Almighty said, "Today I perfected your religion and gave you my entire benefaction." Since that time, the teaching has been complete. The death or absence of the teacher cannot affect it. There remains one question. How can one judge something on which one has not been instructed? Is it by reference to a text that has not been taught, or by making an effort at personal interpretation, ijtihad, and discernment, which presume disagreement? Here is the answer. Do as Muaz did when the Prophet, peace be upon him, sent him to the Yemen. We use the text if it exists, if not, then personal judgment. Thus we shall imitate the propagandists of teaching, doing what they do when they are far from their Imam. With limited texts, they cannot make decisions on an infinite number of cases, nor can they travel to consult their Imam, and then travel back to the person who consulted them. The person surely would have died in the meantime, so that the return would be useless. For a person who is not sure of the direction of the Qibla, all he can do is trust his own judgment. If he took the time to go to consult the Imam, he would miss the hour of prayer. Thus, it is permitted to pray in the direction one estimates to be true, though it may not be the real direction of Mecca. Indeed, it has been said, he who is mistaken in his personal judgment deserves reward, while he who judges correctly deserves a double reward. Everything that depends on an effort of personal interpretation is of this sort. For example, for legal almsgiving, the recipient may be poor in the personal judgment of the donor, whereas secretly he is wealthy. This mistake is not sinful because it was based on conjecture. One may say, my adversary's opinion is as good as mine. We reply, he is obliged to follow his own opinion, like the person who trusts his own judgment about the direction of prayer, even if the others do not agree. Should one ask whether the conformist must follow Abu Hanifa or al-Shafi, God be pleased with them both, or others, I reply, if a person relies on conformism when he is in doubt about the direction of Makkah, what will he do if the initiated disagree? One will say that he must choose from among the best qualified and most knowledgeable about the direction of the Qibla, and then follow personal judgment in this particular domain. It is the same as regards the different schools of thought. In this way, the Prophet and religious leaders were forced to refer the faithful to personal interpretation, despite the risk of error. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, I judge by appearances. It is God who looks after what is hidden. This means I judge according to general opinion taken from fallible witnesses, though they may be mistaken. If the prophets themselves were not immune to error in matters of personal judgment, how much more so ourselves? There are two obvious objections here. The first is that this attitude is permitted in the case of personal thinking, but cannot apply to the very basis of the faith. One who makes a mistake there cannot be pardoned. How can one answer that? The answer is that the basis of the faith is found in the Quran and in the tradition. For the remaining details or disagreements, the truth can be determined by the recourse to the just balance, that is, to the collection of 5 rules cited in the book and recalled in my treatise, The Just Balance. Objection. This criterion is not recognized by your adversaries. Reply. If completely understood, it is conceivable that anyone could fail to recognize it. How could supporters of teaching disagree about it? For I took it from the Quran and learned it from the same book. The logicians do not disagree, for it agrees completely with the conditions and rules of logic. Nor will the scholastics disagree, for it agrees with their ideas about speculative demonstrations and the criterion of truth in the scholastic domain. Objection. If you possess such a criterion, why have you not put an end to all disagreement among people? Reply. I would do so if they would listen to me. In my treatise, The Just Balance, I have explained this. Reflect and you will see that my criterion is good and would suppress all discord if people would only listen to it. But not everyone will listen. Those who have, I have led to agree. Further, your Imam wants them all to be in accord, although they do not listen much. Why has he not managed yet to achieve this agreement? Why did Ali, God be pleased with him, the first of the Imams, fail? Did he think he could make them docile in spite of themselves? Why has he failed so far? Till what point has he postponed success? What result has he had except to increase discord and the number of his adversaries? Yes, it is to be feared that this discord might lead to bloodshed, devastation, the orphaning of children, brigandage, and pillage. Across the world, your work of pacification so far has brought unheard of disagreement. If one says, you wish to put an end to all discord, but anyone hesitating between opposing schools and rival sects will not want to hear only your side and not that of your adversary. Most of them are against you, and one cannot see any difference between you and them. This is their second objection. I reply, the objection above all recoils upon your own head. It is true that the puzzled reader you wish to attract might ask you what makes you better than the others, when most men of science are in disagreement with you. I should like to know what you would say. Should you say, my Imam is indicated by a text? Who would believe you? For this text has not come from the mouth of the prophets. The men of science agree about your inventions and your falsehoods. However, supposing we admit that the puzzled reader concedes that you possess this text but doubts the basis of the prophethood, he suggests that Imam have recourse to the miracle wrought by Jesus, saying, the proof of my authenticity is that I resurrect your father. But suppose he does resurrect him. People did not all agree on the authenticity of the Jesus because he performed such a miracle. Indeed, in this field, there are problems which can be resolved only by detailed reasoning. According to you, however, reasoning cannot be trusted. Yet a miracle does not prove authenticity. Unless one knows what magic is and can distinguish between magic and miracle, one needs to know also whether God ever misleads his servants, a delicate but familiar question. What then could you answer? For your Imam has no mere right to be followed than have his detractors. The supporters of teaching reject the rational arguments their adversaries present, or even clearer ones. Thus, the second objection has very badly turned against its authors. From the first to the last, none is able to answer of them. The spread of error has been the fault of weak persons who wanted to reason with them. Instead of arguing rationally, they only made retorts which prolong the debate but do not save time or silence the adversary. Should one say, this is an argument by retort, but is there a direct reply? I answer yes. One who says he is puzzled without specifying what he is puzzled about is like a sick person who asks for a cure for his illness without saying what it is. The latter should be told that there is no cure for illness in general, but only for a particular malady, such as migraine, diarrhea, or their like. The questioner must describe his difficulty. Then one shows him how to apply my 5 rules. If he understands them, he will recognize that they contain the norm of truth, an accurate measure, and the criterion of precise thought. Thus, someone who is studying arithmetic will understand simultaneously the calculation and the authentic scientific knowledge of the teacher. I have explained all this clearly in about 20 pages in my treatise, The Just Balance, which should be studied. My actual intent is not to reveal the error of their doctrine. I have already done so in my earlier works. First, al-Mujtahidi. Secondly, the book Kitab Hujjat al-Haq, which replies to ideas from Baghdad. Thirdly, the book Mifsal al-Khilaf in 12 chapters, where I reply to ideas gathered in Hamadan. Fourthly, the book al-Darz al-Markan, arranged in tables, which contains some mediocre ideas of their collected in Tas. And fifthly, in the book al-Qista al-Mustaqan, The Just Balance, an independent book directed at exposing the criteria of the sciences and showing that one can do without an infallible Imam. Here I will restrict myself to bring out that these men offer no remedy at all to the different obscure opinions. In spite of their inability to prove the designation of the Imam, we long agreed with them We shared their conviction on the need for teaching and for an infallible teacher. But to our questions on this teaching and the problems we put to them, they were not able to understand, let alone to reply. When they failed, they referred us to the hidden Imam, saying it is absolutely necessary to go to see him. It is astonishing that they waste their life in seeking after the Imam and arrogantly claim to have found him, but strangely have not learned anything from him. They are like a dirty person who wears himself out looking for water, but does not wash himself when he finds it, and thus remains dirty. A certain number of them claim to know a little of the teaching, which amounts to a few insipid crumbs of Pythagoras' philosophy. He was one of the early ancient thinkers, and his doctrine is even more weak than that of the philosophers. Aristotle refuted it and revealed the weakness and error of its theories. Yet this can be found once again in the book of the Brothers of Purity. It is the refuse of philosophy. It is strange to see these people struggling all their lives in search of knowledge, only to be content with worthless banalities, while believing that they have reached the highest point of knowledge. We have kept in touch with them and have sounded out their exterior and interior semblance of truth. Their efforts are limited to making the common people and weak minds gradually admit the need to go to a teacher. If one refuses, they begin to argue harshly in order to silence him. If one agrees and asks to learn the science of the teacher in order to profit from it, they stop and say, because you admit this, go and search out the teacher yourself. They know full well that if they go further, they will be covered in shame, since they are incapable of resolving the least difficulty or even understanding it, let alone replying to it. That is what they are like. Once you try them, you will hate them. We have kept company with them, but now have washed our hands of them. Chapter 3. The Sufi Mystic Way to Truth. After I had finished with those branches of knowledge, I directed my mind entirely to the way of the mystics. I came to know that their way consists of both knowledge and deeds as equally necessary. The object of their works is to eliminate the obstacles created by one's own self and to eradicate the defects and vices in one's own character. In this way, in the end of the heart will be rid of all that is not God the Almighty and will adorn itself solely with the praise of God. However, I found that knowledge came from easily to me than deeds. Therefore, I began to learn their teaching by reading their mystic works, such as Kul al-Qulab, The Food of Hearts, by Abu Talib al-Makki, God be pleased with him. The works of Al-Haris al-Musaybi, and the quotations from Al-Junaid, Al-Shibli, and Aba Yazid al-Bisami, and the sayings of other shaykhs, God hallow their spirits. By doing this, I learned the essence of their theoretical thinking and as much as can be learned through teaching and listening. But it became clear to me that what is proper to it can be learned only through severing or experiencing the mystic states of the soul and the exchange of attributes or behavioral attitudes. With regard to health and satisfaction, consider what a difference there is between, on the one hand, simply knowledge of their respective definitions, causes, and conditions, and on the other hand, the reality of being oneself in good health or satisfied, or between the reality of being drunk and academic knowledge of the definition of drunkenness as the state caused by vapors rising from the stomach to the brain. A drunkard does not know the definition or scientific explanations of drunkenness. He does not even worry his head about it. But a sober person knows them perfectly without experiencing drunkenness in reality. In the same way, a sick physician may know the definition of the health, its causes, and the remedies which will re-establish it, but still he is ill. Thus, it is one thing to know all about the ascetic life, its conditions and causes, but something completely different is to become effectively in an ascetic state of soul, completely detached from the good things of the world. I became certain that the mystics are not great as speechmakers. but that they do achieve certain states of soul. I learned what could be learned. The rest comes only from the experience and following the path on self. As a result of my research in the field of both religious and rational sciences, I have already arrived at an unshakable faith in God, in prophethood, and in the Last Judgment. These three principles of religion were engraved deeply in my heart, not because of carefully elaborated argument, but as a result of particular reasons, circumstances, and experiences, too many to be listed here in detail. I also perceived that I could not hope for eternal happiness unless I feared God and rejected all the passions. That is to say, I should begin by breaking my heart's attachment to the world. I needed to abandon the illusions of life on earth in order to direct my attention towards my eternal home with the most intense desire for God the Almighty. This entailed avoiding all honors and wealth and escaping from everything that usually occupies a person and ties him down. Turning to look inward, I perceived that I was bound by attachments on all sides. I meditated on all that I had done, teaching and instructing being my proudest achievements, and I perceived that all my studies were futile, since they were of no value for the way to the hereafter. Moreover, what had been my purpose in teaching? My intention had not been pure, for it had not been directed towards God the Almighty alone. Had I not preferred to seek glory and renown? I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, and if I did not step back, I would plunge into the fire. I thought of nothing else. All the time remaining undecided, one day I would determine to leave Baghdad and lead a new life. But the next day I would change my mind. I took one step forward and then one step back. In the morning I might have a desperate thirst for the hereafter, but by the evening the troops of desire would have stormed and defeated it. My passions kept me chained in place, while the herald of faith cried, "Take to the road, take to the road, life is brief, the journey is long. Knowledge and deeds are nothing but mere outward appearance and illusion. If you are not ready at this very moment for the life to come, when will you be ready? And if now you do not break your moorings, when will you break away?" At that moment, I felt impelled to go. My decision to depart and escape would be made. But Satan returned, saying, "This is only a passing mood. Do not be taken in by it. The feeling will pass quickly. If you give way to it, you will lose your honors, your well-established, peaceful and secure position, which you will find nowhere else. You will be taking the risk that you will change your mind again and live to regret it. It will not be easy to come back once you have lost your position." This tug of war between my emotions and the summons from the hereafter lasted nearly 6 months, from the month of Rajab 488 after Hijri, during which I lost my free will and was under compulsion. The fact is that God tied my tongue and stopped me teaching. I struggled to no avail to speak at least once to my pupils, to please the hearts of those who were attending my lectures, but my tongue refused to serve me at all. And having my tongue tied made my heart grow heavy. I could not swallow anything. I had no appetite for food or drink. I could neither swallow easily nor digest any solid food. I grew weak. The physician despaired of treating me. They said, "The malady has descended to the heart and has spread from there to the humors. There is no other remedy but to free him from the anxiety which is gnawing at him." Feeling my impotence, my inability to come to a decision, I put myself in the hands of God, the ultimate refuge of all those who are in need. I was heard by the one who hears those in need when they pray to him. He made it easy for me to renounce honors, wealth, family and friends. I pretended that I planned to travel to Mecca, when really I was preparing to leave for Damascus. Actually, I was afraid of alerting the Caliph and some of my friends. Once I had decided never to return, I had to use subterfuges to leave Baghdad. In this way, I left myself open to the reproach of the Iraqi scholars, none of whom could imagine what religious motives could lead me to renounce teaching, which they regarded as the summit of religion. for their ideas of the highest knowledge extended no further. Then people became entangled in their own hypotheses about the reasons for my actions. Some outside Iraq thought the authorities had insisted on my departure. Others, more in touch with Baghdad, seeing that the authorities were trying to keep me whereas I was insisting on leaving, said, "It is a blow from heaven. An evil eye has struck down the Muslims and the wise." Those were the circumstances in which I left Baghdad. After distributing my money and keeping only the absolute minimum to feed my children, my Iraqi money was put to good works invested in pious foundations for Muslims. Nowhere in the world have I seen a better thing that a scholar could do for his family. I traveled to Damascus, where I spent nearly 2 years, which I devoted to retreat and solitude, exercises and spiritual combat. I devoted myself entirely to purifying my soul, cleansing my character, and making my heart ready to glorify God the Almighty according to the teachings of the mystics. I spent some time in the mosque in Damascus, passing the entire day from the dawn to dusk at the top of the minaret where I shut myself in. From the Damascus I travelled to Jerusalem, where every day I shut myself in the dome of the rock. Then I received the call to perform the prescribed pilgrimage to receive the holy blessings of Mecca and Medina, and to visit to the shrine of the Prophet of God, peace be upon him. After having visited the tomb of Abraham, the friend of God, peace be upon him, I set out on the road for the Hijaz. Later, certain preoccupations and the appeals of my children summoned me home to my own country. I returned. I, the person least likely to return, who preferred retreat and who had a taste for solitude and a desire to open my heart to prayer. Nevertheless, circumstances, domestic cares, and material obligations reversed my decision and interrupted the best part of my solitude. My soul was only intermittently in a state of perfect peace. Nevertheless, I did not cease to aspire thereto, and returned to the attempt again and again, despite every obstacle. My period of retreat had lasted about 10 years, during which I had innumerable, inexhaustible revelations. It will not be enough to say that the mystic Sufi follow to an uncommon degree the way of God. Their behavior is perfect, their way is straight, their character is virtuous. If to this were added the good sense of the reasonable, the wisdom of the wise, and the knowledge of the doctors of law, could one be sure that this would improve their behavior or character? Surely not. Every action or state of theirs, their outward appearance, and their inward conscience is illuminated by the flame of prophecy sitting in its niche, beyond which there is no other light on the face of the earth. What can be said about such a way? Its purification consists about all of cleansing the heart of everything which is not God, the Almighty. This begins not with the state of sacralization which opens prayer, but by a fusion of heart with God's name, and is completed by the total annihilation of the self in God. Even the completion is only the first step with regard to one's free will and all that one has learned. It is the first step on the way itself. What went before was only the waiting room. Once one has started on the way, one begins to receive inspirations and visions. The mystics keep vigils in which they even see angels and the spirits of the prophets. They hear their voices and have the benefits of their counseling. From these visions of images and symbols, they ascend farther to the degrees of spirituality which cannot be described. Nobody can attempt to express the states of the soul without failing miserably. In a word, the mystics achieve a nearness to God, which for some can be a virtual indwelling, total union or fusion with God. This is not true. As we have shown in our treatise al-Maqasid al-Asna, the greatest goal, a person in such a state should say nothing but these lines: "Whatever has happened, I shall not speak of it. Think well about this. Do not question me about it." In general terms, people who have not been privileged to test the union know nothing of the reality of the prophecy, but only its name. The prophets were prefigured or prepared by the miracles or charisma of the saints. Thus, the first step of Muhammad as a prophet came when he went to pray alone on Mount Hira, and the Arabs said, "Muhammad is burning with longing for God." Anyone who practices the way will experience similar states of ecstasy. one who has not experienced them, by keeping company with the mystics, may hear accounts of their experiences and be convinced through the circumstances of their ecstatic states. Or one may attend their meetings and profit from their belief, for their companions are never in distress. As for a person who has not been divinely favored to attend their meetings, he may be sure that all this is absolutely proven, as I did in the chapter Ajaib al-Qalb, the wonders of the heart, in my work, the revivification of the religious sciences. Science is verification by proof. Experience or severing is intimate knowledge from ecstasy. Faith, founded on conjecture, is the acceptable of oral testimony and the evidence of those who have experienced. These are 3 degrees, and God will raise through this hierarchy those among you who believe and receive this knowledge. Besides these categories of men, there are the ignorant who in principle deny everything. One speaks to them on this subject, they marvel, listen again, and laugh at it, saying, "What a story! How he goes on!" It is of those people that God was speaking when he said, "Among believers some listen to you, but when they go away they ask those who have been given knowledge, what was he going on about just now?" They are the people whose hearts have been sealed shut by God and follow pernicious doctrines. Such are the men whom God has cursed, for he has made them deaf and blinded their eyes. Having spoken about the mystics, it is necessary to deal with the reality and particular character of prophecy, a completely indispensable matter. This is the end of the part 4 of the reading of the book series Deliverance from Error by Abu Hamid Al Ghazali, may Allah be pleased with him. In the next part, we will be reading from chapter 4, the true nature of prophecy as a universal human need. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.